This is Insight. Phone lines are open. Dial 384-2191.
Well, here we are at the end of a week that started. We went from Monday in July to a Friday in August here. And we have on this first Friday of the month with us in the WDLB studios our Your Honor. I guess is that still a term? I don't know. Did they ever call you that?
Every now and then I get called that, and that's just different.
Yes, Mayor Bob McManus with us here on this first Friday of the month, availing himself to your calls and comments so you know what's going on in the city. 384-2191, 384-2191. You may be watching us on Marshfield Media Access here as Channel 989 on your Charter Digital tier, or on their Facebook page, or through their channel, which is available on YouTube and accessible, I believe, through the city's website. Mm-hmm. If you can find the missing link there, you can click around until you get to where you need to be. But it's accessible there if you want to see the show and do not subscribe to the Charter Digital tier. Everything is, I guess, back and running again. Speaking of media here, we were out for a while. Heavy damage done around central Wisconsin here earlier in the middle of July. And the city also having to go around and clean up. Not as bad as some other places. We were, I guess, lucky in that respect, but we did get some heavy rainfall with 2 inches, just under 2 inches in 2 days in a row.
Yeah, it was a brutal storm. I mean, it took its toll on the people here in Marshfield. Lots of trees down. Power was out for a little while. I'm very proud of the fire department, the police department were responding to calls. Our street department was getting out there to get trees taken off of the street and get them disposed of. And our utility did a great job of getting our electricity back on. There were some people without power for 4, 5, 6, or 8 hours here locally in the city, and our utility did a great job of getting them back on. I think Mother Nature was rough, but she was kinder to us than she was to our neighbors all around us. So I know in Wisconsin Rapids, they had a rough time. What was very nice is there was a lot of mutual aid of once we got the city really kind of back up and running, if you will, and everybody with power. The utility sent a crew down to Wisconsin Rapids, and I understand there were about 50 crews from different municipalities all around helping our friends down there in Rapids. So that was good. And the dump where people take shrubs and broken down limbs for the day or two, or even 3 or 4 after that big storm, it was packed. And city people were there pushing all the brush back, and no sooner did they push it back, more people came in, and so it was a big storm.
How do you budget for that? I mean, that's going to take some time, overtime, or maybe even during the regular city hours to bring your equipment out there and to help out with those kind of things that they would have been doing something else. I don't know that it was anything that they were emergency they were avoiding, but they have timelines on how things should be done too at the city garage. So
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it comes out in the end. I'm sure there's going to be more overtime than normal this year because we had a brutal winter, and then we've had our share of issues going on the streets and trees that had to be taken out. So Dean does a very good job of putting his budget together of just extra money budgeted for overtime, and it's always it's a crapshoot. I mean, sometimes you put in enough, and sometimes you don't. This is where it's different. Where you always hear, and I said even during the election, that you need to run a city like a business, and some things you can. And I guess where I'm going with that is the efficiencies of a business. Because your street division is not a profit center. That is 100% expense. But Dean does a great job of really keeping the expenses down and really forecasting. He forecast well, so we won't know until we start coming up here. Because our year doesn't officially end till December 31st.
You go by calendar then.
Calendar.
Right? There's no fiscal year in the city budget?
Not on their budgets. They go all the way through December 31st. So it's going to be very interesting to see where this all pans out.
I would imagine it would be similar to snow plowing. You don't know, at the beginning of any given year how you came off of last year, how much money is left in that contingency fund, so to speak, that you can splash over into February like we had here with record snowfall, and now we've got damage here around the area in the summertime, so you have to have some leeway in how you do that.
Yeah, you do, and it's different, right now because, as you know, back in January or February when we realized that there was going to be a budget shortfall of $1.6 million, we had to fix that, and we had to fix that immediately, which I think was good. I believe that some municipalities and cities would have taken that 1.6 and danced around it for 7 or 8 years and amortized the loss and blah, 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 blah. And we just went and fixed it. And so now, it's interesting that we're talking budgets because all the department heads are putting their budgets together right now. And then Steve and Ron will have their initial look at what those budgets are and maybe make some initial cuts. But all of the department heads were asked to be empathetic, if you will, of this year because it's going to be a very tight year, that we know for sure. But they still have to, in their budget, even when you're cost conscious, which they all are, and they all do a great job. But even when you're that cost conscious, you still have to have that contingency because life is going to happen. Things are going to happen. We are going to get, I hope nobody listening gets mad at me, but in the winter, we're going to get snow and we're going to have to plow it. And you got to pay for that because you can't just determine when the snows are going to come and how much they're going to do.
Talking with Mayor Bob McManus, you can too here, 384-2191, 384-2191 here on this first Friday in August about the budgets and contingencies that you, I guess, can do humanly possible here. But is this 2020 now going to be the first one to take the punch on this $1.6 million?
It's going to be the one to take the punch, and we've done a lot of, different things to refinance some debt, take advantage of lower interest rate and extend the terms. Our finance director, Ron Alman, has done a phenomenal job. And I will really say, when we figured out what was going on and the huge problem that was there, it took a little while to get to the bottom of it and to see where the mistakes were made. And so not only were those mistakes, now they're very, very clearly defined as far as what we need to do so that mistake doesn't happen again. I'm very proud of the fact of what Ron has done in putting this all together, he and Steve, and to make sure that this doesn't happen again, that we're allocating our payments and our debt properly. So we've extended some term, taken advantage of lower interest rates. So that's going to help in our overall amount. Now that we've got a very clear picture of where our TIF districts actually are, they're really performing quite well. So the problem is what they used to do is take some of those monies out of the TIF and put it into the general fund. Well, that just makes your general fund look a little bit better. And also, if you're thinking that we're going to get this income from these TIFs that they shouldn't have been sending over, then you don't need to raise taxes because you've got this artificial income coming in. Well, now that artificial income is going to be what it should be, and that's going to be dramatically less. So this budget year is going to be very tight, and it's going to be the first time where we're going to get a real good look at what can be done. I'm hopeful that with the debt reduction that we've done, we went down initially when I came in to office, I think we were at 63 or 64% debt to our income, and now we're down about 56%. So when you've got that down, that's going to be helpful because you aren't going to have those higher payments. We've also refinanced some debt, as I said, to capitalize and take advantage of some lower interest rates and extend those terms. Some of the financing that they were doing prior were just 10 years, and it's very customary for city municipalities to go 15 to 20. And so we've kicked that out a little bit. That's going to help. But until we have all the factors in, I go to Steve and Ron almost every day. Do we have numbers? Do we have numbers? And they're still getting everything in. So I believe we'll have some good numbers at the end of the month, and then we'll start our budget meetings. I'm hopeful that the public will be watching on local cable access, or one thing that will be up and running, if not at our next council meeting, the one immediate following, certainly by the time budget comes along, is we will be on Facebook Live. So not only will we be having all of our meetings open to the public, they will also be televised on our local channel 991 and on Facebook Live. So more people will be able to see and be involved in this process.
Two things. One, do you anticipate somebody monitoring comments as you're Facebooking Live?
That's a great question. One thing that happens is during a meeting, there will be no comments from the public, and there is an issue with that, and they're bringing forward in our next Common Council meeting. Should aldermen be on their phones during a council meeting? Because if something is taking place on Facebook and then a person would instant message an alderman, in essence, that's an open record. So that whole thing would have to be part of the public forum, if you will. And if it's not brought out, that has complications. So there's going to be one thing. Steve is coming forward, I believe, in this next Common Council meeting, where the aldermen are going to discuss whether the aldermen approve of aldermen, myself, Steve, the city attorney, having their phones on during a meeting. Because if you can receive messages that you run into a real conflict of interest, down in Madison, they had a huge debacle there a couple of years ago because aldermen were talking back and forth by text. In an open meeting, the open meetings laws are there to protect that from taking place. The public needs to know. Now, so in relation to will public comments be available during the live, the Facebook Live meeting? No. However, immediately that meeting will be posted then on the city website, or the city website and the city Facebook page, and then of course comments will be open then, but not during the actual live presentation.
Exactly. It had occurred to me that if you've seen a Facebook Live post, there are people who are talking about what's happening there at the time, and if the people in the room are seeing that, that could sway their attitudes or their way of thinking that would not normally be a part of a council meeting.
Right. And city staff does a great job. For myself and the aldermen, we get a package on the Friday before a council meeting. The council meetings are at 6 o'clock on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. So we get a package anywhere from 80 pages to 250 pages of information, and many of us study it to take a look at that information. So when we're coming to that meeting, we're coming armed with information. So when city staff presents something to us, we can have a good discussion on that. Unfortunately, and that is all available to the public because those documents, the packet, is public record, so they can see it. Many people don't take the time to go through the packet because it's rough reading. Many of the aldermen have their laptops, as I do, but I still print mine out on Friday because I will take the weekend to go through it. If it's some kind of resolution, I want to completely study it and make notes on the packet, so when it comes up for discussion, if it's city staff or somebody there, I've got my questions already asked or already there, so that when they start presenting, I can check off if they give information that was in there or that answers a question for me. I could check it off so I don't have to ask city staff something that's in the packet. Some of the aldermen are, they just go by they've got their laptop there and they're going through it, and they reviewed it over the weekend. But I just like to have that document there to go through and I could write on and take note.
Talking with Mayor Bob McManus this first Friday of the month of August. You can too here live on AM 1450 WDLB at 384-2191, 384-2191, talking about the business of the city here as we have, coming off quite a month here. As we talked about earlier, we have snow plowing. We talk about that every year, but storm damage that was done and where that money comes from and how that happens. I don't anticipate it would be anything out of the ordinary. I mean, it's just a matter of shifting sands, but when you're talking about a year that you have what was a $1.6 million income that is no more, that becomes a little harder to do. There isn't so much sand to be left around on the table anymore.
Right.
So we also have in this summertime here festivals around the city. The street crews and such are involved in that with barricades and setting things up and shutting down Central Avenue, and that involves several city departments, whether it be police or fire, or how they're going to get around, knowing what's up, what's down, what intersections are available to them and what's not. And when they come barreling down the street, they don't want to have to turn around and go the other way. Oops, forgot that was closed on an emergency run or something like that. So those are somewhat, how would I say, factors that can be accounted for in the budget, though, as to time that is not necessarily needed for overtime, but can be done as part of their regular duties, correct?
Correct. Yeah, when they do their road projects, Dan and Tom, Dan Connect, Public Works, and Tom Turchi and Streets, they do a great job of coordinating all that. And when there are detours, our communication department does a great job of getting that information out there, not only on our website, but to the media partners that we have in the city. But it's still, if you're running late to work and the kids got up late and, the Captain Crunch is gone and ready to go and now we've got to go, and then you go to a road that now all of a sudden today is detour, go around here, it gets frustrating. I'm hearing more and more, which is very fun. Why are we doing so much road work? It's kind of like, hallelujah. Thank you for saying that. And I know everybody is so excited about the orange buckets out there on Central Avenue. I mean, it's like, they are finally on Central Avenue. They believe it's going to be about 2 weeks late due to rain. And also they realized that it was a bigger job than they thought. They had to put in more concrete than they thought to repair a lot of the substructure. Tom and Dan tried to tell the state before that substructure is bad. It's over 100 years old. You really need to do a complete reconstruct on that. The state was more optimistic that we should be okay until they took off those first 3 layers, and then they realized this is pretty bad, so they had to put in more concrete. And now they're done in the middle, but now they're working on the sides and they're putting in the gutters, and so that goes slower. Putting in the gutters and then the corners so that they're handicap accessible, that just goes slower. So it's very interesting to watch that happen, but hopefully we'll be able to get a lot of this road construction done by mid to late September. One thing that's been very helpful is the our website on our website is as future road improvements, and so people can go out there and they could see what streets are going to be done, the dates they're going to be worked on, what's taking place, how much it costs, and everything that's going to be done. So that has helped, and I think as years go on, more and more people will become accustomed to that and can see, so they can realize that their street is going to be closed.
I was kind of surprised that we're halfway through what we call traditional summer, June, July, August, before some of these projects started. Usually they get the jump a little bit earlier because things can, like any remodeling project, you open up a wall and go, I got a little more problem here than I thought, and then suddenly it becomes a little bit later, as we see with Central Avenue. But they have dates on there of when these projects are expected to start?
Yeah, on the website there's dates that they're going to start, and one thing we did is we found some more money. Actually, we found some more efficiency is what we did. I brought together all the utility, the wastewater, and roads and everybody, and just got them in a room. How can we get more done with in keeping the cost down? And it turned into, the initial meeting was, there's no way we're already doing everything. Well, then Sam and Dan, Sam over at Wastewater and Dan, Public Works Director, got together and go, well, maybe we can do, if we know exactly what streets you're doing, because they've got to do some different things with wastewater. Maybe what we could do is coordinate some of our things that we're going to need to have done over the next 5 years, coordinate them better with when you're going to do these streets, and then they kind of pick up the tab for that. So it would be less expensive for wastewater to do it when we're already tearing up, and then they can share essence in the expense. So it's a win-win situation. Well, they did that this year and ended up being just over $65,000. So another project that was scheduled to go next year got booted up to this year. If we can just on that efficiency alone keep doing that every year, that really gets more road work done. Figure over 10 years, that's another $650,000 worth of more road work that we could do with the same time frame. So it really works well.
Talking with Mayor Bob McManus. You can too here on today's Inside program this first Friday in August. 384-2191, 384-2191. We'll be back with your comments hopefully here if you choose to join in after this. Coming to you from, what do they call that in Wrigley Field? The friendly confines here of the WDLB studios on Marshfield Media Access. You could be watching us in video here from our palatial cracker box, as we like to call it here.
Sure.
And with us is the Marshfield Mayor, Bob McManus. He enjoys coming in here, doesn't he?
I really do enjoy it.
And being quizzed by me about whatever we figure out if we can talk about for a month.
It's always fun.
And you can too. 384-2191 here, by the way. 384-2191. You can join in. We talked about construction already and some of the places that people can find out where things are going to be happening if you have, and when, so you know kind of how to plan around if it's going to be in your front yard or wherever it happens to be, things like that. There have been, to our credit here in the economy that we have today, some business openings, and it seems like the chamber is going to have to order another roll of red ribbon somewhere. They've had some ribbon cuttings going on with businesses opening around our community, which I know you are very positive about.
Yeah, well, it's been very interesting. There's been a lot of expansion. Dental crafters, PCA, and a lot of new businesses in the downtown area. I just went to a ribbon cutting yesterday, and it's very positive that there is all this growth that you see, especially in the downtown area. There's a lot of enthusiasm right now to revitalize that, and you're seeing people opening up businesses there. So that's a very, very positive thing. One thing that they all have that is an issue is having enough people to work. That is the biggest complaint I hear. So when you've got record low unemployment, there's, when you hear the word record low unemployment, you think that is really good, and it is. The downside of that is everybody that wants a job, realistically, there's a job right now. There are many businesses here in Marshfield that just can't find staff. They've got jobs available. There's hundreds of jobs, good paying jobs available right now in Marshfield, and the business owners can't find them. So we are not hoping that the unemployment rate goes up, but this is where another challenge that we're looking at within the city is in housing. Now one thing is for apartment housing, there's 250 units going up behind Walmart. There's a couple hundred going up behind the high school, and that's going to help. But people want single-family residences and duplexes, so we're looking for a way in the city where we can help spur that along. I think there's only been 10 new homes built in the city this year, I think, so far. And there's a few different, there's acres available where you could put in a development. But from a developer's point of view, that's hard. If you want to, there's an area there where you could put in 26 lots, in essence, 26 homes. And so you think that would be a really good thing to do, and it would for a developer, but they need to put up about $1.1 or $1.2 million up front before they can ever sell a lot to do the infrastructure. So for many of them, justifiably so, that carrying cost that you have to do that because you don't know how long it's going to take to sell all of those and then put them up. That is too much to do. It's too much of a carrying cost to where it makes it unprofitable for them to do. So this is where the city is looking at different things with Josh Miller, our development services director, to how can we as a city get involved to help with that? Because I don't think the city has been involved in an infrastructure development for 18, 19 years.
There are some who would say you shouldn't be. Let the private sector do its work. If it's profitable, it will happen without having to grease the skids here for certain people. Businesses, that may be a little bit different, in order to get it on the tax base and on the tax rolls. But there are some people who don't think that is your role necessarily. It's because favoritism becomes a problem.
Oh, yeah, you're always going to have favoritism. But this is where it would be. I don't know if it would work if you were going to build a development for just one developer, because then you kind of run into what you're talking about with the favoritism. But if you're going to do it where different developers can, all these lots will be available by the owner and they could sell them to other builders to build homes or to individuals, I think that would be a good thing, because otherwise, how are you going to help your businesses? They need manpower. People need places to move. If you look right now, Marshfield is in such great demand to move into. How do we know that? Because that's contrary to what you may hear on social media and that type of network, I guess. But how do we know that? Right now in real estate, if a property goes up for sale within hours, maybe so much as a couple of days, there's multiple offers on the property, which means you have more people wanting to come in or move up. That lets you know that your area is in demand. And if you look at our housing market, which that's exactly what's taking place right now, multiple offers on properties, and a great job market, that's a thriving economy. Well, you need to make room for more. And ultimately, it would be a good thing with the city, because how does the city expand is by tax base. And so if you bring in 26 more properties in tax base, that could get paid back pretty quick.
There was a time, we run the Wall Street Report here several times a day, there was a time when the factor given new housing starts, and it occurred to me that we were hanging our hat, though, on something that was unsustainable. I mean, there's only so much you can do. There's only so much new building. There's only so many new subdivisions. It's like Detroit. You're turning cars out the other end. At what point do you reach saturation here? How many cars can people drive? You've got people selling them on their front lawns in the city, the cars for sale, because we've got too many. So we based our economy for a while on a new housing start that seemed to me to be unsustainable, and I think it just kind of reined itself in for a certain amount of time. But within cities like this in central Wisconsin, you have fluctuations. There may be a building of the industrial park that will bring some new people in. They talk about new jobs. I'm thinking, are they just filling jobs that weren't, or are they really new jobs? Did the people come into our community, or did they just go from one place to another? We've talked about this for years. A store opens, they left the place. They go to a new place. Well, that's not new. That's just a move. For one they moved into, that place is now doing good. They left an empty spot somewhere else. So, actual growth is not always measured in the way sometimes, it can be a little bit of a numbers game sometimes that people like to play with that. We need to have real growth And that's not easy to do because there are other communities around here who would like the same thing.
Right. And you look at wages have continued to go up. And there are a lot of businesses that are opening and more that are looking to come to Marshfield. Those will be new jobs. Now, some people have second jobs. So you're right. How do you really calculate that? Well, you know for sure that if you have hundreds of jobs available, literally hundreds, and you can't fill them, you know that that's growth. That's one thing. Now, you bring up in another thing, which was the housing starts back in the Wall Street Journal. And I don't know if you were implying anything about the crash of real estate back in 2008 and 2009. That was not a housing crash. It was not a housing crash. The way they started to do loans back in 1992, and this was very frustrating for me because Dodd-Frank and all these other people say, we didn't see any of this coming. Oh, yes, you did. You chose to stick your head in the sand. That's what you chose to do. But not only did you see this coming, you knew it was going to take place. How do we know that? Bob, that's a big thing. Prove that point. In 1992, that's when we started the first stated income loan. So there was a loan for when people get a mortgage, you've got to give, pay stubs, W-2s, and you've got to prove that you've got the money or that you have the income. And you have to prove that you've got money in your savings account and checking account. Okay, good. Well, then they came up with the stated income loan because there were a lot of people that were self-employed, and these types of loans did not hit the Midwest. They hit the coasts, the East and West Coast. There were a lot of people that were self-employed, and they made a lot of money, but because of the way the tax rules are, they got to write off everything. So they might make a couple $100,000, but with the write-offs and whatnot, their taxable income was $10,000, and they paid no tax. So these are people that, but on paper, couldn't go through the normal traditional route. So then for them, they started with, okay, if you put 30% down and you show us on your bank statements that you've got deposits to support your income, we don't need your tax returns. It's called a stated income loan. It went great. More people got homes. Well, then that number went from 30% to 25%, 25% to 20%, 20% to 15%. Now we are at an uh-oh moment. Something's going to happen because now when you go there and you're getting really close. Well, now let's jump forward to the late 90s. You could get 100% financing. This home is worth $200,000. You go in alone, get a loan for $200,000. Stated income, stated asset. You didn't have to show anything, but you had to have a great credit score, over 740. You had to have a great credit score to get this loan. And the judgment was made that if you've got a good credit score, you're handling it well. Now watch this. You're not verifying any income, so people could stay whatever they want. Now here's the key thing. It went from just being those that are self-employed to now people that were working. So you could say that you're the chief French fry technician at McDonald's and you were making $110,000 a year and you would qualify for that loan. Now you understand the problem. Then it jumps forward, Jeff, to a couple of years later where they would do stated income loan, 550 FICO score, 1 day out of bankruptcy, 1 day out of foreclosure, 125%. So if you buy this home for $100,000, you will get a loan for $100,000, and you can walk out of here with a check for $25,000 to improve your home or pay off your credit cards. Stated income, stated asset, credit was irrelevant. And all of these people that we saw in Washington, D.C. said, we didn't even see it coming. Oh, yes, we did. We saw it coming. So now when you're talking about the developments, people are throwing up homes, right? I mean, throwing them up. And because now everybody can get a loan regardless of whether you could pay for it or not. started buying these homes, buying these homes, buying these homes. Well, it caught up with them. It caught up with them. I remember out in California when there were places where you could go where people hadn't made a mortgage payment in 2 to 3 years. They weren't kicked out of their house. Everybody saw this coming. Everybody knew it was coming. And it was insulting when people said, we didn't see it coming. We didn't know what to do. Yeah, it didn't work. So that is the credibility to your argument that you had a little earlier on. We look at the housing starts and we went too much. We're not in that arena now where we're at now. Our arena here is we have a lot of people that want to come to Marshfield. We don't have the housing. So that's much different than, starting a development over here of 400 homes, 400 brand new homes. It was crazy what was going on before.
And the other half of the problem you didn't state was when people made their payments, to whom were they making them? Because people were selling the loans off, and it wound up that a little was going here and a little was going there. So, you can loan on a house and you got the collateral of the home. Even if they weren't making payments, you've still got the home as collateral. But who owns it now?
Right.
Nobody could figure out when the time came due to figure out who owned the home. It was in some sort of hedge fund somewhere, and everybody got a little piece and say, who owns this? Everybody goes, him. They're all doing this. And there was 14 owners of that loan because they were getting a little bit of the income off of that. And so you couldn't hold anybody, and you had dead homes, and you had, zombie houses, and people, the bank, even locally, they didn't know. They sold the loan.
Right.
So they didn't even know who owned the money. You go down to your banker here and say, well, who owns this house? I don't know.
Right.
It's like, I thought you did. Oh, no, that's not how this worked. They passed the buck, and there was no buck to pass until suddenly, who do we talk to about this?
Right. Well, they did these loans back then, 40-year amortization and negative amortization. So you can take out a loan for $100,000. Now, what does negative amortization mean? It means that if you have a house payment of $100,000, let's say that your payment then should be $650 hypothetically. Well, a negative amortization means you're not even making the full monthly payment. So your payment should be $650, but you only have to pay $300. You're thinking, great, my monthly payment is, the common person thinks my monthly payment is only $300. That extra $350 gets tacked in onto the back end of the loan. So every month that goes by, your $100,000 loan goes up by $350. Well, 3 or 4 years down the road, your loan amount now is $106,000 or $107,000, and you're like, what happened?
And you're not even talking interest in it.
You're not even.
So the compound is compounding more.
Yes.
And then when everybody said it's not worth that, that's how you got upside down.
Right. And that's why when that big crash took place, it was a lot of the MI companies and whatnot. Those securities were almost bankrupt the country.
Talking with Mayor Bob McManus here. You can too. 384-2191, 384-2191. I guess part of this discussion, as far as the city business is concerned, is that when you have new construction, it has to be real.
Yes.
And I don't know that the city, we talk about TIFs and giving tax breaks and giving people opportunities to annex and subdivisions and things like that. That's where you guys start to come in. But you got to watch what everybody's doing here, whether or not this is something that is going to be a long-term asset, or is it going to turn into a problem here at some point? And that's where the city comes in. Who do we give TIFs and tax breaks to is where you start to look at this. You can give us a call, 384-2191, 384-2191 here on the Insight program today. B. WDLB's Inside program for the first Friday in August. You know that if you're listening live, but you may be watching us from Marshfield Media Access, because I'm talking with Mayor Bob McManus from the WDLB studios, and we give you an opportunity, or I should say he gives you the opportunity to visit about city business, and we've crossed a few things here. Luckily, we don't have any emergencies or big problems other than storm damage or stuff like that that happens here. Although 1.6 million would probably open your eyes when you first saw that.
It does. It does.
that has been kind of soaked in now, and we're making plans to try to amortize that out. You mentioned that word earlier.
Well, what's interesting with that is it's kind of like, we knew it took place, and so we know it's there. It's kind of like when you get told you need to have a root canal done, and that's the information that we got back in February or March. Now, the appointment for the root canal is when it goes to budget. It's gonna be painful. So I'm optimistic that things will come okay.
The way you talked about it, though, or the words you used, indicated to me that you were more interested in. Now you're talking about here, for people who are listening, a 1.6 annual,
right,
a shortfall. So every year, what you were counting on in years to happen here for what you would consider your general fund isn't going to be there. So now you're going to have to figure out how you're going to be able to cut expenses to live within your proverbial means here. And not because there was any problem, just it was sand in the wrong pile, so to speak, here.
Right.
Budgeting error, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
So are you going to try to do it all in 1 year? Is it going to be real painful one time, or are you going to try to say, okay, because it's an annual shortfall?
Well, it is, but it was a declining annual. So the 1.6 was an accumulation worth of 10 years worth of mistakes. So it wasn't 1.6 per year. We were making up. We went back and made up for it. So we just took care of it now. We really felt like the best way to do it would just be to take care of it, much like we do our own budgets. When you get say something goes on with your car, it's better just to take care of it right now, as opposed to maybe going and putting the repair cost on top of the loan and everything else. It bites you. So I think once we get it taken care of this year, the following years will be okay, because that 1.6 is an accumulation of all of the past years worth of stuff. So it's not just 1 year of 1.6.
But it is an annual thing that you're going to have to deal with, and
Yes.
not have money on an annual basis.
Yes, but it'll be, so for instance, the following year it'll be far less. We're just taking care of the entire problem now. Which is, it's a good thing to do. It's the way most people handle their budgets, right? What does government normally do? Kick the can down the road. And then you just see your debt rise and rise and rise and rise. That is just not a good way to do it.
As you understand it, does that affect your credit rating?
Well, we had a conversation with Moody's, and I'm not aware of the outcome yet, but Moody's was very impressed with Josh Miller, and you'll see it out on our website soon. The growth that's taking place in the city, the real growth of all the different openings, Josh has got listed on a 2-page document. And when you see all the growth and the expansions and everything else, that really has a big effect on Moody's. And as well, the fact that we found it on our own. It's not something where somebody had to come in and there was a lot of conspiracy and blah, blah, or there was any wrongdoing. We found this on our own, and we're taking care of the problem. Those are very positive things. So we haven't gotten a determination yet from Moody's whether it's going to affect our rating or not.
You talked about Josh Miller. He was a guest on the program here last week, talking about the surveys that they did. And what were your impressions from what you heard about the survey results?
Well, the survey, what did people want? They wanted more housing. They wanted more things to do. And they wanted restaurants, and they wanted a steakhouse, which I think is very interesting. There was a steakhouse, but all the things that were there. The good part about this is much of what was on the study, the information that we got back from, I believe, over 1,000 people, was right in line with what the city is currently working on to do. And that's important, to where, the city should be working for the citizens. The citizens are the boss. The city are the employees. So we really should. So it was nice to see that the results of the study were in concert with what were actually going on. But one thing I will say, you see this, anytime you go into the online stuff, well, the city should bring this restaurant or the city should bring that restaurant. The city doesn't do that. People make a decision. I want to invest. I want to open up a steakhouse here. The public decides that. And then when a business opens up, then the citizens decide. They really decide who stays in business and who doesn't. And how do they do that? By frequenting that business or that restaurant or that clothing store or coffee shop or whatever. So the public ultimately decides it. But, there are some entities that are looking to coming to town that I think are going to be very beneficial.
It's interesting to me because what we commonly called as baby boomers, the supper club business isn't what it once was, and yet they want a steakhouse, which in a way is kind of roundabout the same thing. Maybe it's not as fancy, but with fine dining and things like that we talked about, and the younger generation has never really supported that because it wasn't something that how would I say, it wasn't a generational thing that happened like it was after World War II. Right.
Well, people like the Roadhouses and the Applebee's and the Red Robin, things like that. But you have to have enough of a population to support that, which is why I believe some of those don't come. Now there will be more. There are more places that are looking to come, but when they'll be here, we're not sure.
And also there are developments that are being thought about right now by some people that just can't be supported here. And that's the hard part, is that for years, name a city, they'd say, why don't we have a Red Lobster here? Well, when the corporate does the financing on it, looks at it and says, I don't see in Wisconsin, you got Friday Night Fish Fry, and that's why there's no Long John Silver's here.
Right.
They sell seafood. Well, we sell seafood all the time at every mom and pop that's available,
Right.
So it just doesn't come out.
No, and that's really what I was saying with it. You got to have population. You have to have enough population for these types of businesses.
You seem to have a good report, though, about the mall. That came out. That was very encouraging from what I heard on the news.
It's very encouraging, and I believe they're going to be coming back in closed session at this next council meeting, and there's something there in the in the brew that I believe that if it gets put through, the citizens of Marshfield will be very happy. And I believe Ned, when he was here at the last Common Council meeting, he was talking about whoever it is that wants to put in this what he calls box store. They want to be in, I believe, by March 24th or somewhere there. So it's it could move very quickly.
And there are those who say knock it down and start over, but with what? Is it going to be another strip mall like the Walmart Plaza, or is it going to be... Retail is so fickle.
Right.
It's hard. And the city can only stand by and hope that the individual proprietors can make it go.
Yeah, ultimately it's going to be who wants to come and have their store there, which is why Ned and his group, they really want to see this revitalized, and so do we. And so we're very optimistic about it.
As you're watching us here, we got a minute or so left, winding down this time of the year in August. Fair Time is coming up again. That's always a big event for the city as well here in Northwood County. And this year, I'm hoping, as we talked about with the weather, you'll know as you're watching us how this came out by the time we're talking about this, but you can only cross your fingers and hope that everything comes out to be pleasant and that attendance is high.
Right, and weather is a big thing. Right now the State Fair is going on, and they're having a great weather. So I don't know if you can coordinate some great weather for us there on your screen. We would sure like it. But the fair is such a great place. When you walk in there and they've got that big high diver there, and then you got the pigs there, and all the kids showing their cattle and showing their pigs, and the families that are there. And I remember when I first came here my first time, and it was fair time, and I didn't even know that. Cara was my wife. She was telling me about that because she grew up on a farm here. She showed cattle. And I just walked around that round barn. I must have stayed in there, Jeff, for 2 hours. Being a city boy, you know, I was just so excited to go up and pet all the cows. I named them all, and just walked around. And it's magic. It really is to be around that and the dynamic of these animals, and you see the hard work that these farmers do, and the FFA is there, and they're passing down these great skills to their kids, and then you go on these rides. Well, some people go on these rides. I'm not going on a couple of those things because I don't know what would happen, but the rides are safe and they're good, but I'm not a roller coaster person. It's just such a great experience, and it's a great experience.
Well, thank you for taking the time to visit with us again here on the Inside program on WDLB.
Hometown radio station, AM 1450 WDLB Marshfield, a Seehafer broadcasting station.